The Long Game. My name is Elena Morrison, and I'm about to tell you how I destroyed my husband's life with surgical precision. They say vengeance is a dish best served cold. I never understood that phrase until the day I found those photographs. But what makes my story different is this. By the time Marcus realized what was happening, he'd already lost everything and helped me take it from him. Let me tell you about the 3 years I spent planning the perfect revenge and the final twist even I didn't see coming. The champagne flutes clinked together with a crystalline ring that echoed through our empty dining room. I raised my glass to Marcus across the mahogany table we'd purchased in Milan during happier times, watching the bubbles rise in the amber Dom Perignon, vintage 2008, his favorite. The candlelight cast shadows across his face, and I studied the lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair. He was still handsome at 47. That had always been part of the problem. "To 20 years, he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, then silenced it, but not before I saw the name Jessica. "To 20 years, I repeated, taking a measured sip. The champagne tasted like victory, though he didn't know it yet. I'd found the photographs 3 years ago on a Tuesday afternoon in March, tucked in his briefcase between quarterly reports and client proposals. Marcus and his assistant, Natalie, tangled together in hotel sheets that weren't ours. 37 photographs in total. I had counted them, twice. The metadata showed they'd been taken on our 15th anniversary, March 14th, when I had been sitting beside my dying mother in hospice, holding her hand as she took her final breaths. That night, standing in his study, with trembling hands and a thundering heart, tears streaming down my face, I'd made a choice. Not the choice Marcus would have expected, not the choice anyone would have expected. I didn't confront him, didn't scream, or throw things, or demand explanations. Instead, I'd carefully copied every single photograph to a secure cloud drive, returned the originals to their folder, closed the briefcase, and walked downstairs to finish preparing his favorite meal, osso buco with saffron risotto. When he came home 2 hours late, claiming traffic, I'd served him dinner with a smile. The next morning, while Marcus showered, I'd called a lawyer. Not for divorce papers, not yet. For something else entirely. I'd asked for someone who specialized in forensic accounting and complex asset divorce cases. Someone who could help me understand exactly what I was dealing with. That someone was Patricia Chen, a shark in Armani, who'd handled 3 high-profile divorces in the past year alone. She'd looked at me across her glass desk on the 42nd floor of a downtown high-rise and asked one question. Do you want to get angry or do you want to get even? Even, I'd said without hesitation. Good. Then we're gonna need time and patience. Are you prepared to live with him? Sleep beside him. Pretend everything is fine while we build an airtight case. I thought about my mother, dying alone except for me, while Marcus fucked his assistant in a hotel room. I'd thought about the career I'd given up at his insistence. I'd thought about the life I'd sacrificed. However long it takes, I'd said. Over the following months, I became a student of our marriage in ways I'd never been before. I noticed things. How Marcus had slowly, systematically isolated me from my career, convincing me to quit my position as a financial analyst at Goldman Sachs when we married. "We don't need the money," he'd said, his hands on my shoulders, his voice so reasonable. "I want you to be free to live your life, to travel, to pursue your passions. I make enough for both of us." I'd been 24 then, so trusting, so stupidly in love. I believed he wanted what was best for me. I noticed how every asset, our brownstone in Brooklyn Heights worth $4.2 million, the lake house in the Adirondacks, the condo in Miami, the investment accounts Patricia helped me discover, totaling nearly $8 million, were structured in Byzantine ways I'd never questioned. Marcus was the financial genius after all, partner at Ashford & Klein, one of Manhattan's most prestigious investment firms. I'd signed where he pointed, trusted his explanations about tax optimization and asset protection and estate planning. He'd been planning this for years, I realized, making me financially dependent, legally invisible. For 3 years, I played the perfect wife with Academy Award precision. I smiled at Marcus's lies about late meetings and business trips. I made love to him when required, usually twice a week, always initiated by him, always in the same position, my mind elsewhere, cataloging evidence. I threw dinner parties where I laughed at his jokes and touched his shoulder with apparent affection, while his colleagues complimented him on having such a devoted wife. And quietly, methodically, Patricia and I had been building my case. The lawyer had been brilliant. Together, we'd traced every transaction, documented every asset Marcus thought he'd hidden. The offshore accounts in the Caymans holding $2.3 million, the property in Costa Rica titled under a shell corporation called Pelican Holdings, LLC, the cryptocurrency wallets containing $1.7 million in Bitcoin he'd purchased with investment losses. All of it buried in layers of financial complexity that Marcus assumed his simple homemaker wife could never unravel. But I hadn't been simple. I'd graduated top of my class at Wharton. I'd been a top analyst before Marcus convinced me to give it all up. Those skills hadn't disappeared. They'd just been sleeping, and now they were wide awake. I'd also documented the affairs, plural, not just the photos I'd found, but new evidence. Patricia had hired a private investigator named David Reeves, a former NYPD detective who looked like someone's grandfather, but had the instincts of a bloodhound. The pattern of hotel charges that corresponded with client dinners, 14 separate occasions. The gifts purchased on our joint American Express that I'd never received. Jewelry, lingerie, perfume, totaling $23,000. Text messages recovered from old phone backups Marcus had forgotten about, stored in our shared iCloud account. Messages that made my skin crawl. Can't stop thinking about you. My wife is visiting her mother. Come over. You're everything she's not. The assistant, Natalie, had been replaced a year ago, quietly let go after someone's wife found out. But there was someone new now. Jessica Martin, 28, brunette, working in acquisitions. There was always someone new. You seem quiet tonight, Marcus said, refilling my glass. Everything all right? Perfect, I said, watching the candlelight reflect in his eyes. I was just thinking about new beginnings. Oh, he looked mildly interested, already checking his phone under the table. I could see the screen's glow on his face. Probably texting her, the new one, Jessica from Acquisitions, who didn't know she was just another name on a very long list. I've been considering what's next for me, for us.
That's wonderful, darling. We should talk about it this weekend.
He stood, kissing the top of my head absently, the same way you'd pat a dog. I have to take this call. Don't wait up. I listened to his footsteps retreat to his study, heard the door click shut, heard his voice drop to that intimate tone he'd once used only with me, back when I thought we were building something real. I pulled out my phone and opened an email draft I'd prepared weeks ago. Attached were 57 pages of evidence, financial documents showing systematic fraud, photographs, not just of Natalie, but of Jessica and 2 others I'd discovered, a forensic accounting report that detailed every cent Marcus had siphoned from our marriage, every hidden asset, every illegal tax shelter, a private investigator's dossier documenting 5 separate affairs over the past 8 years. The email was addressed to Marcus's business partners, the firm's board of directors, and his 3 largest clients, including the Worthington Family Trust, managing $340 million in assets. His entire professional reputation balanced in my outbox. But I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I opened a different email and hit send. This one went only to Marcus's attorney, Gerald Hastings, who would receive it first thing Monday morning at 9 a.m.,
along with my divorce filing and a motion to freeze all marital assets. The timing was important. Marcus had a massive deal closing next week, the Meridian acquisition, a $200 million merger he'd been working on for 18 months, the one that would make him a fortune in bonuses and cement his position as managing partner. The one he'd told me all about over dinner, never imagining I understood the implications, never imagining I was taking notes. In 3 days, I would file for divorce in New York State, with its equitable distribution laws, armed with evidence of hidden assets and financial malfeasance that would unravel everything Marcus had built. The prenup he'd pressured me into signing, the one his family attorney drafted when I was 23 and naive, the one that gave me a pittance if we divorced, wouldn't survive judicial scrutiny given what I'd unfrivered. Prenups could be invalidated for fraud, and boy had there been fraud. By the time his deal closed on Friday, half of everything would already be frozen by court order. His business partners would learn they'd been working with someone who'd committed financial fraud, who'd hidden income from the IRS, who'd violated fiduciary duties. His clients would discover the man handling their millions had been systematically lying about assets and cooking his own books. The professional reputation he'd built while destroying our marriage would collapse like a house of cards. But that wasn't even the most poetic part. I'd spent the last 6 months quietly rebuilding myself. I'd completed my financial certifications remotely, studying at night while Marcus slept. I'd networked carefully with old colleagues from Goldman, lunches in the city he thought were spa days with friends. And just last week, I'd accepted a position at Sterling Capital Management, one of the most prestigious firms in Manhattan, one that competed directly with Ashford and Klein. My new salary would be $280,000 a year plus bonuses, more than enough to start over, more than I'd made before I gave it all up for him. I would land on my feet. More than that, I would soar. Marcus thought I didn't know, thought I was too sheltered, too dependent, too blind to see what he'd done. He thought he'd gotten away with it. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was about to become clear. I took another sip of champagne and smiled, a real smile this time. Then I walked upstairs to our bedroom and opened my closet. Behind my winter coats, pushed far back, was a small fireproof safe I'd installed 6 months ago. Inside were documents Marcus had never seen. Documents that would complete my revenge. You see, there was something else I'd discovered. Something even Patricia didn't know about yet, because I'd wanted to time it perfectly. 2 months ago, while searching through old email accounts for evidence, I'd found messages between Marcus and his business partner, Richard Ashford. Messages about the Meridian acquisition. Messages that detailed insider trading. Marcus had used confidential client information to structure the deal. Information he shouldn't have had access to. Information that, if discovered, would lead to criminal charges. I'd made copies. I'd documented everything. On Monday, the same day my divorce filing hit, an anonymous tip would reach the Securities and Exchange Commission. They'd start an investigation. By Wednesday, federal agents would be reviewing Marcus's emails. By Friday, when his big deal was supposed to close, the deal would be dead and Marcus would be retaining a criminal defense attorney. The divorce would destroy him financially. The SEC investigation would destroy him professionally. The criminal charges would destroy him completely. But there was still one more twist, the final one, the one that even I hadn't planned. As I stood in my closet, holding those documents, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Miss Morrison, this is David Reeves, your investigator. We need to talk immediately. I've discovered something about your husband you need to know before you file on Monday. It changes everything. Can you meet me tonight? This can't wait." My heart began to pound. What could possibly change everything now? I'd spent 3 years preparing for this moment. What could David have found? I texted back, "Where?" He said, "The coffee shop on Atlantic Avenue, 10 p.m. Come alone. Trust me on this." I checked my watch, 9:15 p.m. Marcus would be on his phone call for at least another hour. I grabbed my coat and slipped out of the house. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived, just a barista wiping down tables and David sitting in a corner booth, his face grave. He had a manila folder in front of him. "What is it?" I asked, sliding into the booth across from him. "What did you find?" David pushed the folder toward me. I was doing one final sweep of Marcus's financials, following a paper trail on some irregularities. "Elena, your husband isn't just hiding money, he's in debt. Serious debt." I opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, loan documents, and credit reports I'd never seen. What am I looking at? Marcus has been gambling. Online poker mostly, but also some high-stakes private games. He's lost $3.2 million over the past 2 years. He's been taking loans from the firm's escrow accounts to cover his losses. That cryptocurrency you found? He sold it all 6 months ago. The offshore accounts? Almost empty. The Miami condo? He took out a second mortgage and blew through it. My mind reeled. But the asset documentation we prepared is accurate for what was there 18 months ago. But he's been liquidating everything to feed his addiction. Elena, the man you're about to divorce is nearly bankrupt. The prenup that would give you $500,000, there isn't $500,000 left to give you. I stared at the documents, feeling my carefully constructed revenge crumbling around me. 3 years of planning, and for what? You can't take half of nothing. "There's more," David said quietly. "The gambling debt. Some of it is to people who don't take kindly to non-payment. Dangerous people. I found evidence he's been using Jessica Martin to courier cash payments to a loan shark named Viktor Sokolov. Marcus owes him $800,000 and, according to my sources, Sokolov's getting impatient." My perfect revenge was dissolving before my eyes. I'd spent 3 years focusing on taking Marcus down. I hadn't realized he was already falling. Then David said something that changed everything. "But here's the thing, Elena. Marcus took out a $5 million life insurance policy 6 months ago. You're still the beneficiary. He never changed it." The words hung in the air between us. "Life insurance?" I repeated slowly. "Yeah, and given the people he owes money to," David trailed off meaningfully, "I'm not saying anything would happen, but accidents do happen to people who owe Viktor Sokolov money, especially people who can't pay." I looked at David and he looked back at me, and suddenly I understood why he'd wanted to meet in person. This was not information you put in an email. This was information that could get someone killed. Or make someone very, very rich. "What are you suggesting?" I asked carefully. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just providing you with information. What you do with it is your choice. But if you file for divorce on Monday, Marcus might become desperate enough to do something stupid, something that might put him in danger. Or," he paused, "you could wait. See how this plays out naturally. Either way, you might end up better off than splitting empty accounts." I sat back in the booth, my mind racing. This was beyond revenge. This was something darker. "I need to think," I said. "Of course. But Elena, if you're going to make a decision, make it fast. According to my sources, Sokolov's deadline is next Friday.
Same day as Marcus's big deal. If that deal doesn't close and Marcus can't pay..." David shrugged. "Like I said, accidents happen." I drove home in a daze, David's folder burning like fire in my passenger seat. When I walked back into our house, Marcus was still in his study, his voice muffled through the door. Still on the phone with Jessica, probably, making plans he'd never be able to keep. I sat back down at our dining room table, the champagne now flat in my glass. I'd spent 3
years planning the perfect revenge. 3 years learning that vengeance is a dish best served cold. But maybe the coldest revenge of all was doing nothing. Just waiting, watching, letting Marcus's own choices destroy him while I stood back, innocent and ignorant, the grieving widow who'd never known her husband was in danger. The life insurance would pay out $5 million, tax-free. I could file for divorce Monday and get nothing. Or I could wait and potentially get everything. I raised my glass to the empty room, to the ghost of the woman I'd been 3 years ago, and to the person I'd become. To new beginnings, I whispered. Marcus's laughter echoed from his study, oblivious to the fact that his entire world had already crumbled. He just didn't know it yet. And me, I had a decision to make. File for divorce and destroy him with my own hands, or step back and let his own demons do the work for me. The champagne tasted bitter now, but revenge, I was learning, sometimes had an aftertaste. I picked up my phone and stared at the email draft to Marcus's attorney. My finger hovered over the delete button. Outside, rain began to fall, and somewhere in the city, Viktor Sokolov was waiting for payment from a man who couldn't pay. I thought about my mother dying in that hospice bed. I thought about 15 years of lies. I thought about the life insurance policy and the dangerous men Marcus owed money to, and the terrible, seductive possibility that sometimes the best revenge is simply stepping out of the way. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. I deleted the email. Then I poured myself another glass of champagne and waited to see what Monday would bring.